have chosen the best friend's brother as my anchor. I am Olivia, 34 years old, a designer who loves order and quiet mornings, and I thought of him as off-limits. My best friend Mira's older brother, Marcus, freshly divorced and twice my age, a man who wore life like a seasoned coat. Neat on the outside, yet warm on the inside if you could only coax him to breathe. Our weekend plan was simple and harmless. A lakeside escape meant to restore that small spark you pretend you do not miss when you are busy with meetings, budgets, and the endless hum of a daily routine that feels safe even when it is not enough. I cherished Mira's easy laughter and her faith in the quiet strength of family. The way she believed in the right kind of love, as if it could survive any storm if you simply gave it time. And I wanted that in some corner of my heart. The kind that you keep clean and guarded until the moment it becomes something you cannot pretend to ignore any longer. Marcus arrived late Friday afternoon with a look that said he had slept in the car and woke up at the sound of his own life. Not quite broken, but bent in a way that told you he had learned the hard way how to carry a load and still move with dignity. He parked outside the wooden cabin and stepped in with that half smile that had always unsettled me, the one that said he was listening even when you spoke soft or not at all. The first hours were ordinary, the kind of ordinary that settles in like a warm blanket. The kettle singing, the wooden floor creaking with age, the scent of pine from the walls, the small talk about work and children, and the plans we would never truly make because life is stubborn and refuses to hand you a map when you need it most. It was not until we stood in the long shadow of the porch rail trying to lift a bag from the car that our fingers brushed for a heartbeat longer than necessary. A spark that startled us both into silence, and in that silence I realized that the word off-limits had never tasted so bitter, never felt so false. The setup was fragile and honest in the same breath. I had a stable life, a patient husband named Daniel who was generous to a fault. A marriage built on rituals and shared Sundays and the careful keeping of promises. And I had a longing I rarely admitted aloud, a quiet ache for a presence that could match my own pace and still pull me toward the edge of a new dawn. I loved my work, and I loved Daniel, but sometimes the days wore a thin line, and I could feel the line give way when Marcus spoke softly about loss and what it means to start again. The way a man who has learned to live with regret can still remind you of what you deserve. That night we lingered by the fireplace, the firelight painting gold across Marcus's face, his breath turning to mist in the cold air as he spoke of a life that could be rebuilt from the shards of a marriage that did not end with fireworks, but with a quiet, stubborn choice to walk away with some dignity intact. The room smelled of smoke and coffee and rain on the window, and in those moments I found myself listening not just to his words, but to the cadence of his voice. A rhythm I had not heard in years, not since the days when I believed love might be a simple thing and not a risk you carried like a shield. The inciting moment came the next morning when Daniel, who had been my partner in every sense of the word for more than a decade, did what he had not done in years: pack a suitcase and leave a note on the dresser that read in careful cursive, "I am done. I am so very tired. I will not pretend anymore." And the room filled with the sound of a door closing in a life that suddenly felt hollow and too large for one heart to hold. I stood there with his words echoing in the silence, my breath slow and uneven. And I saw Mira's face in the hallway, a mirror of worry and unspoken questions. And at that exact moment, Marcus reached for me with both hands, not to console, but to share the weight of a truth we both knew we could not pretend away. When love arrives, it does so with a force that makes your choices feel both suddenly clear and terrifyingly uncertain. The rising action unfolded in a series of small, careful steps that smelled of rain and the clean, unglossy honesty of late morning light. We talked about fear and healing. We talked about the long ache that follows a breaking. We talked about how a person can be steady and generous even as their own life is not whole. And we found ourselves listening to each other more deeply than before. The way a storm teaches a house how to stand with its bones revealed. The more Daniel's absence pressed on me, the more I found myself drawn toward Marcus. Drawn not by reckless desire, but by the unspoken alignment of two people who had learned to lose and to survive, who could recognize in one another the same weathered tenderness that had kept us from becoming strangers when the world changed around us. There was a moment, late on the second night, when we stood outside under a sky that burned with stars and rain, yet promised a kinder dawn. And I saw him look at me with a seriousness that felt almost religious, as if we were being asked to choose not just a path, but a future that might begin with apology and end with something brave and unconventional. If this confession has you on the edge of your seat, hit like and share, because you will not believe what happens next. The next hours were a careful balance of restraint and fevered honesty, of saying too much in whispers and then letting the silence carry the weight of what we could not say aloud, of letting the fact that my life had just been rearranged by another's choice loosen the grip of fear that had held me in place for far too long. In the days that followed, I walked through the house I thought I knew, with Daniel's absence ringing in every room, and I walked beside Marcus through the days, sharing coffee, listening to the rain against the window panes, and tasting the salt of a fear that turned into courage as I admitted to myself that love could be a second chance, even if it began with a betrayal of the heart I thought was safe. We both knew the risk. We both carried the ache of other things untold. But we moved forward with a promise to be gentle, to be honest, and to give ourselves time to heal the old wounds before they could swallow the new light we found in each other. The end of the weekend did not erase pain, but it did carry with it a decision I could not ignore. I would not pretend that the past did not matter. Yet I would not let a fear of judgment determine the future I deserved. I would learn to trust again, slowly, with a man who had learned to share his grief and his hopes, with a tenderness that did not seek to fix me, but to walk beside me as I rebuilt myself. I would say yes, if not to a perfect picture, then to a real one, where two people, both weathered and hopeful, could find room to be imperfect together and still choose each other every day. And so I step into this new season with Marcus by my side. Emotional storytelling, forbidden love, second chances, mature romance, infidelity in marriage, lot after loss, grief and healing, tenant love story, romantic narration, YouTube romance, healing through love, slow burn romance, older woman, younger man, heartfelt story, true feelings, emotional connection, faceless love, Olivia and Marcus, narrative romance, love found me.